April is Alcohol Awareness Month, and every April I try to use my experience, strength, and hope, as well as just my experience as a professional in the mental health field to educate, to spread information, and just be a resource, I guess you could say, for people who are either impacted by alcohol directly, indirectly. I would feel like we all are on some level, but generally just to share information about alcohol use, just awareness in general of how it affects our society, how it affects us as women, mostly here, how it may be showing up in your personal life or in your relationships that you have. And then I also try to do something in September for Recovery Month. So there's hope and there is change, that is possible for people who are struggling with alcohol use for whatever reason. And so I like to talk about the addiction and concerns of it just as much, or I like to talk about the addiction and the concerns of it, but also talk about the recovery part because that is my testimony personally. And I think other people just need to see that other side. I think we get a vision of what it looks like in the active addiction stage or in just the not the best habit to have stage, you know what I'm saying? But we may not get that recovered space. So I definitely want to leave space for that in this series, but definitely throughout the year, I will try to do my best. So if we could, with the people who are here in the chat, give me on a scale of 1 to 5, maybe we should do, no, let's do 1 to 10. On a scale of 1 to 10, how knowledgeable do you feel like you are about alcohol use, addiction? And I am separating those because it's a continuum, right? So 10 meaning that I'm an expert, either personally or, educationally, career wise, would be a 10. And then 1 would be I really don't know much at all. I'm here to support you, or I'm really lost and need somebody to fill me in. Like, give me, if you guys wouldn't mind, on a scale of 1 to 10, how knowledgeable or aware do you feel like you are of alcoholism as is? Okay. Miss Patricia has an 8. Hey. Okay, we got an 8 here. And whoever's over an 8 gets to go live with me. How about that? We can co-lead this live. Okay. All right. So we have 8, 7, and 10. So I'm preaching to the choir here. Maybe I'm preaching to the choir, but you know what? This is always a good time to refresh and have dialogue too. You know what I mean? And if any other numbers that come in, that is totally fine. I thought that I knew what I thought I knew before I actually knew more. And so I think my number would have been lower at a certain point. Funny story actually with that is that before I personally got sober myself, I was an adamant watcher of Intervention on A&E. I loved that show. I would watch Intervention, y'all. And this isn't a situation where I'm just going to put myself on blast all night. I'm not going to do that. I do have a formal talk that I want to give, but um, I would watch Intervention and drink my wine while I was watching Intervention. Like, literally thought that I knew everything about what addiction looked like and how I would know. And oh my God, how do these people, what are they doing to themselves? And I was drinking wine, and, the story goes that I actually, ended up needing to stop myself. And it's just so crazy how that situation didn't quite speak to me like I would have thought. So yeah, it's just interesting how, you can think that or, and something I'm going to talk about today is that it's a continuum. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're all on a continuum of our relationship with different things. And you could plug in any substance or any vice of any sort. We could do this with social media. We could say, okay, how addicted am I to social media? And go on a spectrum and say, well, it's not that big of a deal to me, or it's a problem, or I'm not sure. We could do that with anything. But I'm saying all that to say that I do think it's always good to have dialogue around alcohol, its role in our lives, and what we can do about it. Okay, so this first talk, if you're just joining in, welcome to Conversations with Kristen. This is a series called Can We Talk About Alcohol? And for this first part, I want to talk about just the signs of drinking, okay? The signs of a drinking problem really is what I want to talk about. But I also want to share with you guys that I personally have dealt with my own alcohol issue. I am 9 years sober at the time of this video. Lord willing, we will just keep pushing. We will just keep pushing with that for the rest of my life. But I have also worked, I'm a licensed therapist, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I have also worked in treatment centers as either the women's therapist for like the intensive outpatient groups, or a family therapist as a liaison between the treatment team and not the client. Like I was kind of like the family's therapist. You know what I mean? The family was my client while the actual client was in treatment. And so I've really gotten on all the different levels, a front row seat into what addiction looks like, how it starts, how it progresses, how it destroys, how it creates delusion and illusion, and how families are involved in either helping that person come to their own conclusion about their drinking problem or facilitating that drinking problem getting worse. And that was something that working as a family therapist was primarily my role, was to educate the family and give the family their own recovery process so that everybody got better. Because if it's just the one person that was drinking that's being focused on, you can miss all the other functions of the family that actually like affect that. So that is my classifier, I guess you could say, for this talk, and that's kind of where I want to speak from today. When you guys hear me talking about healthy habits and healthy living and staying active, you guys, those are part of my recovery, my recovered life. Okay, so let's get into part one of this, of drink signs of a drinking problem. You guys, we are all on a continuum, and I think I have to say this again because we are all on a continuum when it comes to our relationship with alcohol. There's signs and symptoms, but sometimes we can get caught up in the number. Well, I only have. We kind of try to rule ourselves in and out, and this is not to tell you guys you have a drinking problem or not. It's just to kind of let you know sometimes how we can talk ourselves into minimizing something or justifying its role in our lives. And so this is not about numbers. You'll know you're an alcoholic if you drink 3 drinks a night. That is not the situation. These are more signs and relational things, behavior things that start to happen that can let you know that you may have a drinking issue, or just want to improve your relationship with drinking altogether. So some people are sober or want to be sober. Some people are sober curious. Some people want to reduce the amount of drinking that they indulge in. So you could really be on a continuum, and I want to say that because everybody can improve their relationship. There is no look, and that's the number one misconception, is that there's a look that goes along with having a drinking problem or alcoholism. The standard, person under the bridge with the brown bag, like that's what it looks like. Or the person that just loses their job and loses it all, that's what it looks like. That is what it looks like on a continuum and in a very severe situation. But there are so many other instances and so many other points on that track where that person was on their way there anyway. So the addiction was already active 5 years before that point, 10 years before that point. But the problem is we don't always want to look at it 5, 10 years before that point. We want to minimize and justify. So as a clinician, that is something that I have noticed, is that we have to come out of denial a little bit in order to get better. And that's with anything that you want to change. So I just wanted to emphasize that because that's where the issue comes in, of identifying yourself in these other behaviors. Okay, so the signs and symptoms are going to vary. Okay. For me, my tolerance had gotten to a point where the signs and symptoms were a little bit more severe, but the role that it played was just as consistent with how it was when I wasn't drinking that much, if that makes sense. All right, so I'm going to read from a list in a way, but also talk some of the behaviors that you're going to see when a drinking problem is growing. Is, I would say, number one would be an increased tolerance. Okay. And I'm not ranking these. I'm just kind of putting out there what I see as most common, as one of those early signs, is an increased tolerance. All right. Think if you drink casually or not, think about how much alcohol you used to drink when you were in your younger years or whenever that first drink was, versus how many you're able to drink now, and still not feel under the influence, or however the case may be. All right. So tolerance means that you start to need more of the drink, more alcohol to get the desired effect. All right. A lot of people think that this is person specific, but really, y'all, alcohol is addictive. It functions that way with everyone, right? So if you drink alcohol consistently, your tolerance will increase. That is just how it works. Okay. So that is a sign. That is a sign to be aware of. Another one would be desire or losing control of how much you're going to drink. So this is kind of getting a little bit further, I would say. No, let me go back. So we have increased tolerance for one. I would say increased frequency would be another one. Okay. So let's say it goes from Friday and Saturday to Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And then it goes from Thursday, Friday, Saturday to Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday during the day. All right. So next thing you know, you've gone from 2 nights a week of drinking, maybe in social settings, to now we've tagged on a couple more either social settings or just personal time at home where now the drinking has increased in frequency. Okay. Tagged onto that one would be the tolerance in a way, but also, again, just noticing that you're drinking more during those times. All right. So you have increased tolerance and an increased frequency. Those are some big ones that really kind of lead to this addiction starting to occur. Okay. And y'all, this can really happen to anybody because of the addictive nature of alcohol. There is some research that certain people are affected differently by alcohol, but this could happen to anybody. Okay. All right, so with increased frequency and increased tolerance, the next thing I would say is potentially losing control. This is one that is very sneaky, because what I hear often when I was working with clients in treatment specifically is that they would say, I'm choosing to drink on these days. I'm choosing to drink Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday during the day. And then I'm choosing to drink on Monday. Or they may even find excuses to drink on a certain day. Well, it's the basketball game on Monday, and then it's happy hour on Tuesday, and then Wednesday I go to dinner with my husband, and then Thursday it's movie night, and then Friday it's Friday, and then Saturday it's Saturday, and then next thing you know, there's a reason, and the talk is, the mental talk is that I'm choosing to do this. I could stop whenever I want to. I could stop drinking. I could reduce whenever I want to. But then the next question would be, so then why don't you? And it's like, well, I don't want to. Well, why don't you want to? Because I like to drink. And that's kind of where I literally have had this conversation with myself and with other people around, why would you want to drink every day for whatever reason? What would be the reason why you would want to do that? Because I like drinking, but what we don't think about is how it makes us feel and what it allows us to escape, which are tagged onto the emotional signs. All right. So behavioral signs, physical signs, increased tolerance, drinking more than we used to, drinking more often than we used to. I would say a sneaky one, losing control over how much you're drinking. You could also this would be when you're starting to make rules around, I'm only going to drink wine. I'm only going to drink beer. I'm only going to drink one. I'm only going to drink two. I'm going to eat before I drink. I'm going to eat after I drink. I'm going to, all these different rules. Those are signs of losing control. And those are signs that your tolerance is increasing because you're having to constantly pull it down in order for it to feel normal, you know what I mean, or socially acceptable. Okay. Other behaviors that you might have would be secrecy. Okay. So something that, I'll share some of my personal stuff with this one, but secrecy was something that that became a part of my story. People not knowing how much I had actually had. So I might go, well, did I do this? Maybe I probably did. I did, or somebody did. Go to the bar and ask for a double of something and then come back as if it's just one. You know what I mean? Like something like that. Or getting the normal glass of wine and knowing where you're supposed to stop, like where they stop the pour when you're at the restaurant, and that that's where you should stop, but because you're at home, you double it up, right? The secrecy around that, like I wouldn't normally drink and ask for double at the restaurant, but since I'm at home, I'll just make what I used to call like a diva glass. I used to call it that to make it seem like it was fancy, right? But really, it was just me drinking into excess. So any type of secrecy or feeling like you need to hide your behavior usually is a sign that there's something not quite right about it. Other behavioral issues, poor decision making. If you're making decisions that you would normally make, again, y'all, this is not frequency necessarily. This is just your decisions and not being in control of the actions that you take while under the influence. Okay. And then also, I put on here, I feel like I talked about it, but wanting to drink more often. So even if you don't get to drink more often, there's this desire to drink more often. Like, oh gosh, I can't wait till Friday so I can have a drink. I cannot wait. I need a drink to deal with this. I need a drink to deal with this. And that kind of pulls us to some of the emotional impacts of it. So some other signs of drinking from an emotional standpoint is drinking in direct relationship with stress. I've had a stressful day. It's Friday, it's 5 o'clock somewhere, and then giving yourself permission to drink over your stress or to relax in the evenings. Okay. This is one that is debatable because some people say, well, what's wrong with having a glass of wine at night to relax or whatever? And I would say, well, it's not a problem until it is. And it's just about knowing when that is a problem. You know what I'm saying? Which goes into all the other things that can sometimes come up is it's not a problem until it is. But what I would say is, are you able to relax in any other way? Okay. That might be a starting point to say, okay, maybe, so let's say there isn't anything wrong with relaxing with a drink at night. But can you relax any other way? And that's usually where, when I'm working with clients, they're like, no, that's what I do every night. Or that's the only way. That's the only way I can go to sleep. That's the only way I can cope with the kids. That's the only way I can get through the family weekend is if I have a drink. And that's where I would say that would be more so of a red flag. Okay. Drinking to release stress, drinking to forget about your problems, drinking to move through grief. Okay. Drinking for any emotional reasons, sometimes even celebratory reasons, needing drinks in order to celebrate, in order to be in fun environments, right? Drinking to feel more confident. That was one of my motivators, was that drinking gives you that, the liquid courage they would talk about, and I could be so confident when I was doing that. Those are all emotional ties to drinking. And on the flip side, if you're experiencing mood swings, random mood swings, random irritability, depression, anxiety, even. Those can be directly related to drinking, and it really doesn't matter how much you are drinking. People can have that happen from just having one, really. One drink can do it, 10 drinks can do it. It just depends on you and your body and how it's affecting you. Let's talk about the social implications of a drinking problem. And again, y'all, I'm telling you this to first assess yourself, because I think that's where we sometimes miss the mark, is that we want to figure out somebody else's relationship with alcohol. We want to get the notes so that we can go back and fix somebody else and take care of someone else. But I tell you, when I was functioning and working as a family therapist, there was, now I've just had my case study, I've just worked with the people I've worked with, but there was almost always someone else with an issue in the family. It's just that what we call it was literally the person in rehab would be the identified patient. It didn't mean that I wasn't the only person that needed stuff. That was just the identified one. That was the one that had actually done the intake and gotten themselves into rehab, basically is what it was. But almost always when I was working with the family, there was some other type of compulsive, addictive situation going on, something else. And that's not to kind of make them feel bad. It's about, keeping your eyes on your own road and figuring out your situation, as opposed to what the family would often do is focus on this person getting better. They've got to get better. They're causing us issues. And then come to find out, perhaps they're coping with their loved one's addiction by drinking themselves, or they secretly have a gambling issue, or they secretly have an issue with sex, or they secretly have something that's going on. Because addictions don't necessarily just pop up randomly in that sense. Sometimes it's modeled, sometimes it's observed, sometimes the same lack of coping skills in the environment that allowed the addiction of one person to flourish is the same environment that the other people in the family are a part of. And so you have to kind of look at yourself with this. And so I just want to give y'all a heads up with that as I'm talking about some of the other more socially and relational behaviors here. So absolutely relational problems. If alcohol is causing a problem within your relationships, I 100% see that as being reason enough to take a further look. Now, I know sometimes it's hard for us to know whether we should take heed to what someone else is saying, but if you're consistently finding that alcohol is at the root of arguments that you're having, disagreements, or being unable to have hard conversations without drinking, or drinking being a part of the hard conversation, or making the conversation worse, whatever the case may be, or having a friend circle that you only drink around, or that encourages drinking, all of those types of things, just those are relationship issues that I would say would point to perhaps having a problem. Sometimes people will change their environment to align with their drinking habits. And so when I first got sober, and really for a lot of people that I've consider myself to be lucky with this one, but a lot of people have to change their environment completely because over time they have curated an environment and a friend group that normalizes their level of drinking. All of their friends drink, or everybody at work drinks, or they're bartenders, you know what I'm saying? Or there's something that just kind of normalizes it. And so if you find that, wow, when's the last time I've been to a social event or been to a friend's house or girls' night or a vacation or a family function where alcohol was not present? Think about that. Think about it in a social way. Of course, maybe you've been at the house or visited someone and it hasn't been there, but when's the last time you kind of gone to a social gathering and alcohol was not present? Does anybody have an example of that? I don't know if that puts y'all on blast or not. But yeah, think about it. When is the last time I went somewhere and there was no alcohol at all? It wasn't centered around alcohol. I would say, if you go to a football game, there's going to be alcohol. If you go to a hockey game, a soccer game, there's going to be alcohol. Family reunions, even Passovers, not the Passover itself, the repast, I'm sorry, the repast, not the repast itself, but even after someone has passed away, oftentimes there's alcohol involved. And so thinking about that, how am I shaping up my life to where alcohol is at the center and alcohol use is normalized? All right, some other things that you might see is replacing actual help with drinking. So instead of talking to somebody, instead of getting connected with the therapist, instead of coping or doing anything else, you just replace it with drinking. I remember thinking that drinking was my only friend. That like at the end of the day, it was almost like I kind of pedestaled it like God or something. Like at the end of the day, it's just me. As long as I have a drink, I'll make it through. You know what I'm saying? Or the thought that I was gonna have one later would help me push through. And that's such an unhealthy relationship with the substance that never replaces human contact, human support, a real relationship with God. You know what I'm saying? So that would be an example of it replacing other things, or you find you're isolating yourself from other people and replacing that time with drinking time. Okay. Going a whole weekend without seeing anybody, but you've been drinking, or you used to go out and do X, Y, and Z, but now you stay home and drink. I think this when COVID happened, I feel like that was a time period where I really saw. I don't know if anybody else felt it or saw it, but I really saw a shift in how alcohol was used. People literally replaced their social lives with drinking. And it was kind of sensationalized. It was kind of like, woo, I can drink at 9 a.m. and go to work because we're working remote. And I don't know if that's still happening or not, but that was definitely something I remember seeing normalized on social media. Or since we can't go out, since we can't go anywhere, might as well drink, and making that the replacement. Some other things, lying to other people, hiding your drinking. Again, I mentioned that one earlier, but hiding your drinking, lying to other people, avoiding other people that kind of maybe are more aware of drinking issues that might call you out or might, figure out what's going on. All of those things. And again, y'all, what is the common denominator? All of these changes or environments that we create are based on the role of alcohol there, right? So let me read some of these comments. There's always alcohol. I noticed that I would have a glass of wine some evenings to unwind. I started to realize It was to get past things I didn't want to address. Yeah, yeah. A glass of wine was enough to mellow me out, to shower and go to bed. Absolutely. So that is a good example of how the amount doesn't necessarily matter. It's the role that it plays in your routine in your life. You know, that is a great example of that. And so instead of for me too, I can relate to that. Instead of laying down, now what I have to do, I get that journal out. I gotta journal it out. I gotta pray it out. I gotta like do something else. Sometimes I scroll. I'm not gonna lie, but I have to do something else in order to cope with those emotions. But that glass of wine being the suppressant, literally, that relationship already has some unhealthy indicators involved. It really doesn't matter how much, you know. But what happens with the functioning of alcohol is that if you stick with that glass of wine for long enough, I'll tell you guys, this is science. This is not even choice, all right? If the person who commented that stuck with that glass of wine for long enough, eventually that glass of wine is not going to help you go to sleep anymore, because your tolerance is going to come to a level to where that doesn't do it anymore. That's just how substances work. Addictive substances work. Okay. And so what happens is now you have to bump it up in order to get the same effects that 2, 3 years ago used to just mellow you, and then you shower and go to bed, whatever, whatever. What ends up happening is that that one glass is not enough. Then it's a big glass. That's what I did. This is the insanity. This is the lying of it. Is that it's still one glass, yeah, but it's the big like bowl glass, and it's filled to the top. That is not one glass of wine, right? And sometimes when we're honest with ourselves, it's like, was that one glass? Was that really one glass? Is that what they would have poured to me at a rest poured for me at a restaurant, or was that a little bit more? You know what I'm saying? We just got to be honest with ourselves, and it could just be me, but we've got to be honest with ourselves and also know that eventually that's going to increase. Okay, I should have mentioned my pour was a diva pour. Okay, so I had the diva glass idea too. I don't know if that must be a thing. I feel so old sometimes. I'm like, is that still a thing? But that's what I would call it too. It would be bigger glasses. Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for your honesty. This is how we learn. This is how we identify ourselves for sure. Someone else says, my drinking went from 1 to 2 per week to daily during COVID. That daily drinking started disrupting sleep. Yes, absolutely. I think COVID, I'm really interested. I had concerns for that, you know, just as an observer. I had concerns for that because that period of COVID for me personally was about how to stay sober when everyone else I felt like was using alcohol to cope. And I had to figure out how to not let that be, you know, something that I did not toe back into on any level. But I felt like I was like, I wonder how that plays out over time. And it kind of seems like things have maybe gone back to normal, but I can't, I just have to imagine that that's affected more people long term, you know, because going from drinking once or twice a week to daily, depending on how long it lasts, that is kind of a harder habit. I mean, with anything else, that would be a hard habit to break with no addictive properties at all. But it can be especially hard when there are addictive properties involved, like there is with alcohol and other substances. Daily drinking started to disrupt your sleep. Yes, that I think that's a common myth. Maybe I could do a video on myths too. A common myth is that it helps you to go to sleep, but honestly, what it really does is it disrupts your sleep altogether. Okay, when we're drinking, it is not activating the natural melatonin in our body and calming us down in a way that is prompting us for sleep. It's not. It is suppressing our central nervous system for a certain period in time while alcohol is in our system, and then immediately after that alcohol has left your system, you almost have like a what's the term? I'm missing the term right now. But an overshoot of energy that comes back, and I'm forgetting the term on that. Please forgive me. Which will cause you to wake up. So usually when people are asleep all night, it's because of the amount of alcohol. If you're using alcohol to go to sleep, in that way, habitually, it's usually about the amount that you're drinking more so than it is really the alcohol kept me asleep for 8 hours. I usually it's going to disrupt and you're going to wake up again. Your central nervous system gets suppressed for a certain amount of time, and then as that alcohol leaves, it activates again, and it kind of it gets worse. The anxiety that you feel gets worse because all of that has been suppressed, right? Let's see. I have recognized that I use alcohol to navigate my social anxiety. I'm trying to attend events and drink mocktails. That's a great point that you mentioned there, as far as the role that it can play in social situations. I definitely think, from a professional standpoint, I will say I've heard that a lot, and that is something that I would work with clients around. Around trying to figure out how they would re-enter into social settings, particularly for women. I don't know, I wasn't the men's therapist. I worked with them in like group settings, but as far as like the actual more personal, intimate groups and one-on-ones, I would primarily work with women, and that was a big one. The social anxiety, being confident in my body. When I drink, I don't have to worry. So I feel more sexy. I don't worry about how I look so much. If I've gained a little weight, lost a little weight, whatever, I just feel free and like I can be myself. And then now that I'm stone cold sober, I feel like everybody's looking at me. I'm more self-conscious. I don't feel at home in my body. I feel bad about the way I look. All those certain things start to come up, and it can make it hard. Or it could just be conversation, like literally the social anxiety of sparking up conversation and just generally being confident in yourself. And so I personally struggle with that. I'm extroverted, so maybe not as much, but as much as other people might. But I struggled with that in feeling confident, and I had to learn how to let it be awkward. Really, that's really what I ended up doing. I had to let it be awkward. And then eventually, I remember one of my friends telling me, she was like, "Wow, this is awkward." And it's like, yeah, if it's awkward, it's almost like there was this thought that something, an environment being awkward was just like the worst thing ever. And then as I got into like recovery spaces and stuff like that, it was just kind of like, so I go into this, and again, this takes a lot of work, so I don't want to minimize it, but I go into a space and it's awkward, and we sit in the awkwardness, and then it's over. And it's just like, oh, there was nothing really to fear, like my mind told me that I need to fear it. And so now I'll go in and I'm like, oh, yeah, it's a little awkward. It's a little awkward, but I'm not going to force myself to go back into an unhealthy behavior, especially for me when if you drink at this party, we know that the way that your pattern has gone is that it doesn't stop at the party. You do it then, and the next thing you know, it's the next day, and it's 2 days from then, and then it's 3 days from then. And so it's no longer about the social anxiety, it's about the function of an addictive substance in your body, right? So thank you for sharing that. Let me see if I can get closer. I love y'all's comments. Thank you so much for sharing. I know it's not easy. It's not easy to talk about this. Exaggerated night sweats. Yes. Yes, you all are all giving these are like, I have so many ideas for how I could do these lives, but these are like the side effects. You know what I'm saying? Like the physical side effects of, I'm going to do a live on that. I'm going to do one of these lives. Whoops, excuse me. One of these lives, I'm going to do something on the side effects. We're talking about the signs as far as our, role, or our side, using it more often, and our tolerance increasing and just navigating that. But night sweats, disrupted sleep, all those types of things are absolutely side effects of alcohol on any level. It just depends on if you feel them. You can do with this information for tonight, I would say, is just give yourself some time to consider your relationship with alcohol. Either, explore your relationship with alcohol, and or explore your relationship with other vices in your life and see what improvements you want to make. Thank you all so much for tonight. I really appreciate it. Have a good night.